I tried several different things to get that to embed in the PowerPoint presentation. It wouldn't. But that's one of my favorite ads on TV right now for several reasons. But I love that. Cool. That's you've got to be really cool to be able to, say that. Cool. We are in Mark chapter 8, and we're going to be talking about zombies this morning. And all the kids in the rooms said, "Yeah." Never seen church like this before. Last week in Mark chapter 8, we were looking at the problem of what I call crossless Christianity, the problem with trying to remove the cross from discipleship. Peter came up with the idea. He rebuked Jesus, if you remember, and we'll read that here in a minute. But Jesus immediately turns around and he says to Peter, what? Get behind me, Satan. And I think the reason that Jesus makes that statement to Peter is not because he's calling Peter Satan. I think that Jesus recognizes that voice. He'd heard it before. The idea that you don't necessarily have to go through the cross in order to reign, in order to be elevated. Jesus makes this statement in John 8 to his little band of men in Caesarea Philippi. They're kind of on for lack of a better term, they're on vacation. They've kind of stepped away from the area that's occupied by the Jews, and they're up in a section of geography that they can, I think, probably be somewhat anonymous. And so Jesus is just kind of, let's call it a retreat. He's got the disciples on a retreat, and he's got them huddled, and he says, "Who do folks say that I am?" And they kind of postulate the theories as to who they think Jesus might be. And then he says, "Who do you say that I am?" And of course Peter, who's always the one to, speak, says, "Well, you're the Christ, the Son of the living God." And then Jesus goes on to say, the Son of Man is going to have to suffer and be rejected by the Jews and be crucified and be raised on the third day. And so it's at that point that Peter says, "That's Jesus. What are you thinking?" This is kind of John's paraphrase, but I mean, it had to go something like this. What are you thinking? That's not going to happen to you. And so look with me at Mark chapter 8. Verse 31, he began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected. Verse 31 of Mark chapter 8. He began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders, chief priests, and the teachers of the law, and that he must be killed and after 3 days rise again. And that just sounds so stupid. I mean, truthfully, from a human point of view, just imagine, here these guys think that Jesus is the Messiah. He's the Christ. He's the one who's going to liberate us from Roman rule, and he's going to reign in Jerusalem for 1,000 years. And I mean, he's got all of these, they've got all these expectations on Jesus. And then Jesus has them in a kind of a retreat, and he's got them huddled together, and he says, "So here's the way this is going to play out. I'm going to be rejected by the chief priests and the leaders of the Jews, and they're going to torture me, and they're going to kill me, and then on the third day I'm going to be resurrected." And I mean, I think Peter just said what everybody else was thinking. That is just dumb. That's what Peter's thought process was. And so Peter took him aside. I love the fact that Peter is so polite. He took Jesus, to the side so that it wasn't humiliating for him, and rebuked him, kind of offline. I think that's great. Peter took him aside and he began to rebuke him. And when Jesus turned and looked at his disciples, and then he rebuked Peter, "Get behind me, Satan," he said. And this is the the little phrase that I want to look at this morning. You do not have in mind the things of God, but the things of men. And we talked about this last week, that Philippians chapter 2, and I'm not going to jump over there, but just for time's sake, but Philippians chapter 2 said that in order for Jesus to be elevated to a place where everyone will bow the knee, everyone will bow the knee to Jesus and confess that He is what? Lord. That's right. So how did He get to that position? Well, He got to that position by demoting Himself. And if you look at Philippians 2, and I won't take the time to unpack it, but you look at Philippians 2, there are 7 different individual self-demotions where He existed in the form of God, but He demoted Himself to a human, not just a human, but a slave human, not just a slave human, but a human crucified on the cross. He demoted Himself 7 times in 7 different major ways in order for Him to reach that place where God exalted Him so that at the name of Jesus every knee will bow and every tongue will confess. Okay? So God's plan to get Jesus to that position of elevated lordship was to demote self and to die on the cross. And then we say the same thing that Peter says. That's just plain dumb. I mean, anybody in here who thinks that you're going to step out of those doors and voluntarily demote yourself and God's going to lift you up, if you look me in the eye and tell me you don't think that sounds dumb, I'm going to call you a liar. Because the truth of the matter is, from an earthly point of view, that makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. That we would step out of the door. It works okay on Sunday morning, but I mean, you step out in the real world and demote yourself and then believe that God's going to lift you up? Really? I mean, that's what you think? By the way, I got to stop right here and talk about life and death as qualitative statements. And you guys hear me talk about this, but I want to remind us of this. There is this use of life and death in the Bible, both Old Testament and New Testament. It begins with the idea of the tree of life. In the Garden of Eden, humanity Adam and Eve had access to the tree of life. It was the tree of Zoe. Zoe being the word in the Greek that refers to life not from a biological point of view, but life from a qualitative point of view. Anybody in here who's ever done something really, really stupid in front of a whole bunch of people? Is anybody? Am I the only one? I had this. Everybody's me. I want to tell my story. I had Sabrina was in the hospital. Nate was. Actually hadn't discovered America yet, but he was getting close, and Sabrina was not doing well, and she was in the hospital, and I don't remember where I had been, but I was on my way back into the hospital to stand by the bed of my sweetheart, and I have my keys in my hand, and the elevator door opens, and it's cram-packed. I mean, cram-packed full of people. And I walk in the door of the elevator, and I drop my keys. Now, I couldn't have done this if I had tried 1,000 times. I dropped my keys, and you know that little crack where the elevator door is? My keys, they didn't even hit they didn't hit anything. It was just, it was a swish. It just, zing. And then I hear this, clink. And everybody in the elevator goes, oh. And I died right there. Have you ever had anybody make that statement? And what's really funny to me is they usually say, and I literally died right there. No, you didn't literally die. Or we'd be having a funeral instead of laughing about it. So, you didn't literally die, but you figuratively died in that moment. What that means is that the quality of your existence dropped through the elevator shaft, at the moment that particular thing happened. So we in our culture still use the concept of life and death from a qualitative point of view. My kids often were fond of saying, if Mom finds out, we're going to die. Well, no, you're not, but you wish you were dead if Mom finds out. That's what that means. Or, we see somebody that we perceive to be, at the apex of human existence, and we say, boy, that guy is really living. Okay, so there is this concept both in the Old Testament and the New Testament that refers to qualitative existence as life. It's the word zoe in the Greek, and it means that you aren't just existing. Jesus would say in John 10, one of my favorite passages of Scripture in the entire Bible, the thief comes to steal and kill, but I come to give you what? Zoe, that's right. I come to give you life and to give it more abundantly. I want you people not to just exist. I want you people to live. I really want you to live. We have done so much damage to this concept in our legalistic approach to things. God's going to send you to hell if you do this, this, and this. That's not true. God's not in the sending people to hell business. God's in the saving people from hell business. We are perfectly capable of sending ourselves to hell. Right? We are perfectly capable of making zombies out of ourselves. He is in the process of saying, if you do that, you're going to diminish the quality of your existence. I guarantee it. And if you'll just listen to what I have to say, if you'll approach it this way, I can give you what? Real life. Not just existence, but real life. The word aesthetic, we hear people talk about, well, that's a very aesthetic piece of artwork. You know what that word means, literally, is that you are affected by that art in such a way that all of your senses are alive and online. That you are experiencing the moment. That you are, what? Really alive. Made alive by that. So you watch Kylie in a play, for instance. And I've been there, and I watched her step out on stage, and all of my senses are alive at that very moment. So that's John Dennis, alive and online. Anesthetic is exactly the opposite. It's what happens to you when you go into the dentist's office and he comes in with that needle and he says, I love this. They always say the same thing. Now, don't bite your cheek after I do this. Like I've got a temptation to chew my face off on a regular basis. But he puts the stuff in your mouth and then he walks out of the room and then your face begins to feel like it's about to slide off your head, and it's been anesthetized. It's the opposite of aesthetic. It's anesthetic. You are dead, numb. Now, zombies have become kind of a big deal. I don't know if you guys have been paying attention, but I Am Legend, and then World War Z, and Caleb and I on occasion watch a little. Now this is a great line. I love the name of this television series that's on TV. In fact, by the way, right now, as far as cable TV is concerned, number one. Last night, what? Walking Dead. That's right. What Walking Dead is, and this is, by the way, for the the video folks on the web. This is not an endorsement of Walking Dead or any of these others, by the way. But let me tell you, if you guys just find a street corner at 8:45 or 7:45 Monday through Friday, find a street corner and watch the people drive by, and you will see The driving dead. That's right. You will see this look on their face. They are just, I mean, it's so obvious that they are anesthetized. They're not, and by the way, check it out at 5:15. It hasn't changed any. There is a danger. This is Bible 101. There is a danger that humans will have a near-life experience. Just almost get to life, but not really get there. Be alive, but not really alive. Ephesians chapter 2. I don't have time right now to unpack Ephesians 2, but it begins with these words. You were dead in your trespasses and sins. And then you read on down through Ephesians 2 and it says, and He resurrected. You didn't resurrect yourself. You understand? He resurrected you. What is Paul trying to say? Well, he's trying to say that there are a lot of folks walking around who think they're alive, but they really aren't. 2 Peter, by the way, 2 Peter 1 verse 3 and Ephesians 4 verse 18 both talk about, and I love this, and again, we could go there and read those, but just for time's sake, because I'm smelling the potluck, and I know you guys are too. There's some chili out there that I'm kind of thinking I'm going to be in first in line. Ephesians chapter 4 and 2 Peter 1 verse 3 both talk about the fact that we miss or have the potential of missing living the life of God. And that's such a powerful concept. You were not, like my group of young people on Friday nights, we talked about this a few weeks ago. You weren't designed for this world. And you know it. You can tell it on a regular basis because there's nothing here that really ever, satisfies. There's nothing here that really ever lights you up. I mean, it may light you up for a little while, but then you get bored with it. And, I was watching the other day, there was a news article about this guy in one of these squirrel suits. You know what I'm talking about? Where they jump off of a cliff and they have these tiny little wings. And they soar through the air, and this guy was cruising along and he flew into a cliff. And died. The physics, there's just some physics involved in impacting a cliff at 150 miles an hour. It's not good for you. So there is this question in my head as to what possesses a guy to jump off a cliff with tiny little wings. I mean, he didn't do that. I mean, that wasn't his first jump. It was. I suspect he probably did a bungee jump first, and then he did that for a while, and then he, graduated to parachuting, and then eventually parachuting got boring, and so you see what I'm saying? And so I mean. Caleb has asked me several times, why do you want to parachute? There's just something about getting out of a perfectly good plane. It doesn't make any sense to me. And I am absolutely petrified of heights. I don't mind flying. I love flying in an airplane. I know this isn't logical, but boy, you're not going to have me jumping out of a plane for all sorts of reasons. But here's the thing. I suspect that after I made 25 jumps, it'd be kind of boring. And I'd be looking for something else. Why is that? It's because you weren't designed for this. There is something about the human being that is never going to find satisfaction in this world until you find Him. So, this is where I was going to play the video. I absolutely love this guy. He's so cool. And one of the things that of course, the whoa, hey, let's don't be putting labels on people. That's just a classic, like a zombie. No, hey, don't be putting labels on people. And then his ear falls off, and then he says, and this is so key. He says, I'm a zombie. That's the first step. Is for you to recognize I'm a zombie. I'm not really getting out of life, and I know I'm not getting out of life what I was intended to get out of life. So the question is, how do you get from zombie to not? And it's a paradox. I found 2 pictures of paradox for you. Just took you a minute, but yeah, I know. It's time for lunch. God uses paradox on a regular basis to teach us, and it's all over the place in the Bible. There's and you guys do your own study. This would be a good study to start in Genesis and go through the book of Revelation, looking for all the places where God uses paradox. A paradox is something that doesn't appear to be logical but turns out to be. It looks like a contradiction in terms. So, there's this idea that Jesus would say, take my yoke upon you. A yoke is something to enslave you. But in that whole context, he's talking about being free, about having your burdens lifted. And so, how do you get to a place where your burdens are lifted and you're free? Jesus says, well, you have to put my yoke on. Have you ever seen an oxen with a yoke on his back? He doesn't look like he's free. So there's a paradox there. And it has a way of kind of tunneling past your defenses and teaching you something that you might not have listened to if it hadn't have been paradoxical. Jesus will say on a regular basis, you see, but you don't really see. And people are going, what in the world is that guy talking about? And then I think later on they got it. I understand. But the prime paradox is in Mark chapter 8. This is the big one. This is the one that constantly gets hammered home. If you really want to live, you're going to have to die. You have to die if you want to live. And Jesus, in fact, just read with me Mark chapter 8. Jesus says, verse 33, get behind me, Satan, talking to Peter. You do not have in mind, this is not a good translation, by the way. The original word you do not have in mind is the word phronio in the Greek. And I know I don't expect you guys to remember that, but it's really a cool word. The King James translates it this way. You do not savor the things of God, but the things of men. What does the word savor mean? That's kind of an old word. Yeah.
Truly appreciate, enjoy.
Yeah, there you go. So I am literally anticipating right now. In fact, those little things right there are beginning to kind of swell up a little bit. Over Tim's chili, or Gloria's, it doesn't matter. The chili that comes out of that factory is primo. And so I'm thinking in terms of savoring that chili. It has to do with affection. What is chief among your affections? And the answer, if you're honest, what's chief among your affections is you. And I'll tell you what's chief among my affections. It's me. And so Jesus will say, you do not savor the things of God. It's not your affections aren't wrapped up in the things of God. They're the things of men. And then he calls the crowd to him along with his disciples, and he said, if anyone would come after me, he must deny himself, and take up his own cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save his life will lose it, and whoever loses his life," watch this. If you want to save your life, you're going to lose it. But if you'll let go of it, if you'll crucify self, I can give you life. It seems paradoxical. It seems upside down. That, in fact, and most of us know somebody that we work with or we come in contact with on a regular basis who's totally and completely focused on themselves. You know those people? Let's stop with the elbowing. That's not fair. But you know, you'll come across people from time to time that are they're totally what we call self-absorbed. Now, let me ask you the question: how happy do those people? How happy are they? And the truth of the matter is, the more self-absorbed a person is, the more miserable they are. The more zombie-like their life is. And what they walk away thinking, well, I'm just not absorbed enough in myself. And so what's happening is they're imploding. And so God says, wait a minute. Crucify self. Stop thinking about self. Get self out of the equation, and I can give you life. What you exist, the way you're existing right now, what you're experiencing right now is a near-life experience, but it's not really life. Let me give you life. Consequently, the cross of Jesus, of all things, is the symbol for abundant life. Admit it. I'm a zombie. But there is hope in that if we'll walk with Him, if we'll draw close to Him, He can save. He's not. We need to understand this. He's not saving us from some realm out there where there's fire, and there may be fire. I don't know. I've never been to hell, so I'm pretty sure I couldn't tell you. But my suspicion is that hell has nothing to do with fire at all. It's very likely it has to do with living eternally as a zombie. It probably has to do with living eternally and having no real quality to your life. I mean, what would you call that? Hell. That's exactly right. I love I think it's in Numbers. I was going to quote it, and I don't have it, but I love this statement. Moses and God are having a conversation, and he makes this statement. God makes this statement. He says, "My arms are not so short, what? That I cannot save. My ear is not so heavy that I can't hear." He says, I don't have T-Rex arms. You know, I've got long arms. I can reach down and pull you out of yourself. I can resurrect that zombie. And how do we know we can do that? See, this is so cool. It's not just symbolic, by the way. The crucifixion and the resurrection is not symbolic. I don't believe that it was just symbolic. I think that Jesus died on the cross. I believe his tomb was empty 3 days later. But I also believe that there is a symbolism in that. And by the way, Paul will just do this in Ephesians chapter 2. He's going to say, here's how I know he can resurrect Ralph. Because he what? Resurrected Jesus. It's the same, and by the way, dunamis is the Greek word. We get our word dynamo from it, and dynamite and other things. He says it's that same power that's directed toward Jesus that got him out of the grave that's directed toward Dan and Stephanie. But you got to put yourself in proximity to that power in order for him to do that. And one of the first things that has to happen is you got to admit, I'm a zombie. I'm not experiencing life the way God intended for it to be. And then you draw closer to Him. And eventually, He will resurrect you. So Jim, come lead us the invitation song. And,